You're listening to Recovery Survey, the podcast that shatters stigmas around different types of addictions and takes a deep dive into spiritual principles.
Every time I turned to it, it worked. So I turned to it more and more. You know, I was told I was fat, ugly, stupid, lazy, worthless, never going to be anything. You know, you tell that to a kid, they believe it.
My guest today goes by the name of Rex ShadesEagle, and he is the author of a new book called No Love, Life Lessons from a Recovered Junkie Ex-Con. Welcome to the show, Rex.
Well, what's up, man? How you doing?
I am doing great, man. I'm glad we finally got to connect and get to see each other face to face on this Zoom call. And man, I'm excited about our conversation today. I know you're working on a book. You got a Kickstarter going, man. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
The book is, I don't know, man. I'm 47 years old. I started reading when I was, the family legend is that I started reading about 2.5, 3 years old because my favorite word was why. Why? I was one of those kids. And I was the youngest of 9, I think. 9. 2 adopted. The rest were all my dad's. My mom, who raised me at that time, was all of our stepmom. She married my dad. He showed up at her diner with like 5 kids. And they ended up falling in love. And she ended up raising his 5 girls, and they adopted 2 boys, my brother and me together. Not together, but them as a couple adopted them. He was 5 when he was adopted. I was 4 months old. But I was one of those kids. Why? So my sister Tammy, who is my youngest of my sisters, she got tired of it. So she was like, if you want to know why, you got to start reading books. So the first book we ever read together was One Fish, Two Fish, Red Fish, Blue Fish. I fell in love with reading. And I remember in 3rd grade, I was reading at like a 6th grade reading level. And I remember in the 4th grade, I had to do a book report. I couldn't figure out what book I wanted to do it on. And the choices that they gave us were like way below my reading level. It was like Tales of the 4th Grade Nothing, or like Super Fudge. You know what I mean? And my brother hands me a copy of George Orwell's Animal Farm. I read it in the 4th grade, and I did a book report on it. And my mom helped me. I had to look up a bunch of the words. I didn't know what they meant. She helped me. She didn't help me write it. She just helped me research it. That kind of changed my life. I got really into punk rock and never stopped reading. Got really political. Was in a punk rock band-ish. We didn't really do much. In high school, we were called SDI. Started off as severely deranged individuals. But then when we got really into punk, like Dead Kennedys and Black Flag and like Minor Threat, we changed our name to, because that's when Reagan introduced the Star Wars program, right? The Missile Defense Program. Well, it was actually called Strategic Defense Initiative. So that's what we changed our name to. And I just kept reading, you know, and I decided I wanted to be an author, you know what I mean? But I wanted to write like fantasy, sci-fi. I was really into that. I never really followed through with it, though. It was always something that I just talked about. It was always something when I got high. I was like, oh, yeah, man, I'm going to write a book someday. And I'm going to be like, dude, Basketball Diaries. I'm going to write about getting high, make a bunch of money. And it's funny because, you know, 8 years after I stopped doing dope, stopped getting high, I decided that I wanted to write a book. So the book is kind of pretty much, it just tells my story. I didn't find out I was adopted until I was 6. So like from Christmas of 1979 to about Valentine's Day of 1980 was probably the worst 2.5 months of my life. When I was 5 years old, with my first memory as a child was my mom and dad getting in a fight really bad. Someone had called. My dad wasn't home. Somebody had called on the phone. And my mom was all pissed off and drunk. She didn't drink. She was the kind of woman who she would have a half a glass of wine and stop because she was getting tipsy. And like, that was like after drinking it for like 4 hours. Like, that's how, you know what I mean? That's how amazing amazingly low her tolerance was. And I remember her drinking brandy and like having way more than one glass. Events happened, things went on, and she ended up pulling a gun out on my dad and pulling the trigger, firing off a few rounds. Well, fortunately for everyone involved, it was my dad. My dad was the head groundskeeper for Glassboro State College at the time. I believe he was. That he may not have been the head groundskeeper, but he worked for the college at the time. I'm from Glassboro, New Jersey. It was the local state college in my hometown, and it was his starter gun for the track and field events, and it had blanks in it. So this is small town New Jersey in the 80s. Nobody goes to jail, right? My dad used to do private detective work for the local police department. So the cops come. Cass, are you going to kill him? No, I'm not going to kill him. Ed, are you going to kill her? Nah, it's all good. You know, okay, everybody's Christmas Eve. You know what I mean? Like, get your shit together. And I'm sitting on the stairs leading up to the bedrooms. My dad comes around the corner. And I'm like, Dad, I was like, is Santa Claus still coming? And he just looks at me like so serious. He's like, Santa Claus is dead. He's like, I shot his fat ass. He's bleeding out in the backyard. 5 years old, dude. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like, what? Right. So, okay. So fast forward a couple of weeks. My birthday is on January 16th. My 6th birthday, we spend the entire day in a courtroom. I'm like, man, what are we doing in this courtroom? You know, but I don't know. I'm just with my dad, whatever. He's my hero, right? He's in the National Guard. So he's like G.I. Joe. He's a multiple black belt in multiple disciplines of martial arts. He used to take me, he used to train in Kim's Karate in Glassboro, New Jersey. And he was a black belt in 4 other disciplines. And he was learning karate. And I asked him, I said, later on in life, I said, why did you study karate? He's like, because I could never beat Master Kim. He's like, everyone who ever trained me, I was always able to beat him. I was never able to beat Master Kim. That's off topic. So anyway, I'm sitting in this courtroom, and as the day goes on, we leave, we go to lunch, go to the diner, come back, we spend the rest of the day. All these families are doing all these things, and all these kids come and go. And so finally, at the end of the day, the judge, you know, and this isn't verbatim at all. He's like, Mr. Walter, that was my dad's last name, Ed Walter. He said, well, it looks like his real father is going to show up. He's like, so we remand custody to you, adoption approved. He's yours till he's 18. Right. So I'm like standing here, I'm holding my dad's hand, you know, like what's going on here, you know? So on the way home, I'm like, Dad, what is he talking about? His real father, you know? He's like, so basically he tells me, he's like, I'm not your real father. He's like, I'm your real mother's father. He's like, so I'm really your grandfather. He's like, and your parents didn't want you. He's like, they dumped you with the sheriff. He's like, and I went and got you. He's like, so now I'm stuck with you. So that became a running theme. And now I'm stuck with you, which eventually evolved into the wish I'd have never gone down there. It was the biggest mistake, which eventually around 11 or 12 turned into, because I grew up right across the bridge from Philly. We used to drive across the bridge a lot. You know, it's just kind of like going to Denver, you know, if you live in Boulder, Colorado, you know, it's just a little drive. And I remember driving across the Ben Franklin Bridge and my dad saying things like, you know, I should just do us a both favor and just drive off this bridge. Like, who the hell says that to a 12-year-old, to an 11-year-old, you know? But anyway, back to the story. A couple weeks after I find out I'm adopted, maybe like the end of January, my dad pulls me into his CB repair shop, which I thought was the greatest thing in the world. He had all these CB radios and ham radios, and he repaired them and sold them. And he said, if you had to choose who you were going to live with, your mom or me, who would you choose? And I'm like, why do I have to? He's like, we're just playing a game. So I'm like, you know, I thought about it, you know, it wasn't like a quick response, but as a kid, you start going through a list of things, you know, like mom makes me eat Brussels sprouts, she makes me eat lima beans, she makes me make my bed. take baths. Dad takes me fishing. He takes me on stakeouts when he's doing work for the police. We play Chinese checkers. Like he makes Billy, my older brother, turn on Gilligan's Island when that's what I want to watch. You know what I mean? Like, so I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, I want to go. If I had to choose, I would choose you. That would turn out to be probably the biggest decision I unwittingly ever made in my entire life. About a week later, we moved into another house across town, in with a woman and her 1, 2, 3, 4 children. One boy younger than me, and the other 3 were teenagers. Another girl who was the youngest of the 3, and then 2 boys. And immediately within the first 2 weeks, started beating me. I mean, bad. The second time she actually really laid into me was with a soup ladle, and she busted my head in 3 spots in the back of my head. I had to go to the hospital and get stitches. On the way to the hospital, she tells me, she pulls over in a dirt lot, and she looks me dead in the eye. She tells me, if you ever tell anybody about the things that go on in this house, she's like, I'll kill your dad. She's like, I won't do anything to you. She's like, and I might go to prison for the rest of my life. She's like, but you'll have to live the rest of your life knowing that because you couldn't keep your mouth shut, your dad's dead. So I kept my mouth shut. Went to the hospital. The doctor made her leave the room because she wasn't my immediate family. Her and my dad hadn't got married yet. His divorce wasn't even final yet. And the doctor, he's like, son, he's like, do you want to tell me what really happened? And the story was that I was running through the kitchen and I slipped on the freshly waxed floor. And then I hit my head on the dishwasher, which would have been a great story had I had one split back of my head. But it was so jagged apparently and so busted up that it was obvious that it was multiple blows from a blunt object. And I just kind of sucked it up and I was like, I told you, slipped in the kitchen, hit my head on the dishwasher. So this is the crazy part of the story, right? The doctor was like, okay, stitched me up, sent me on my way. That tells you how different the world then was from the world now. So I'm just going to say this real quick before I get sidetracked and don't forget to say it. The number one reason I wrote this book is because when all of the shit that happened to me was happening, nobody said a thing. Nobody was a voice for me because I had no voice. I had absolutely no voice at all. There are millions of children out there who are being molested like I was, who are being beaten like I was, who were kicked out of their house as children, 12 years old. I was kicked out of my house at 12 years old because after 6 years of abuse from this woman, and I'm not going to go into the abuse, probably the worst part of all the abuse, the 6 years that it went on from 6 to 12, because I was kicked out at 12 years old when I fought back. I'll tell you about that in a second, because that's a pivotal. That's when I took control of my life, I believe. That's when the choose your own adventure became the point in the story. It was like, to do this, go this way. Do this, turn to this page. But the worst part of the abuse was my hero didn't save me. My dad was this larger than life Godzilla of a man in my life who, as soon as he had a younger, fresher, cuter kid to play with, he neglected me and threw me to the side. And that's probably the biggest thing in the society that we live in today is neglect. Time is the one commodity that we can never get more of. It's the most valuable thing that we can give to our children. Absolutely. It's the one thing, because there's a point in parents' lives. I had a kid. That's part of the story I'm not going to go into. I can't tell it all. I'll leave something for the readers. But I've had the privilege of being a stepfather once in a bad marriage and now in a beautiful family. There's a point when your kids will stop wanting to hang out with you, you know? So I feel like parents don't take advantage of the time when they do. I idolized my dad. And when she started doing this to me, I didn't understand what I was doing wrong. I just wanted a family. You know, I was so happy. It sucked leaving my mom, but then this new family moves in. Now I don't just have one older brother living at home. I have 3. And now I got an older sister back at home because mine had moved out. And now I got a little brother. You know what I mean? Like, so like for me, it was like winning the lottery. You know what I'm saying? It was like losing the state lottery and then like, oh, you're sad, and then winning the Powerball. You know, that's how I felt. And then for no reason at all that I could ever understand, and still don't to this day, got abusive. So at 12 years old, something happened. Nothing really amazing, but my stepmom came at me with a 2x2, 3 feet long, and she started to swing it. And it was on target to hit me in the head. And she's a pretty big woman, definitely overweight, from German stock. You know what I mean? She was a large woman, large overweight woman. She could swing. You know, I had been dealing with it for 6 years. I knew what she could do. And I don't know, man, there's a couple of events in my life that I can remember, like movie scenes that I've seen a million times. Like I can tell you every detail of them, exactly how they happened. And time froze. Like time literally stopped for me. In my head, I had this conversation. And I know with who now. That's part of the book too, is getting to understand my mental health. I had a conversation with myself, and I was like, man, this woman is trying to kill you. It may not be today, it may not be tomorrow, but if you don't stop it, she's going to kill you. I made a decision. Time, boom, clicked back on and put my arm up. And she hit my arm, broke my arm, broke the board, and I took off on her, man. I beat the shit out of her. I mean, it was bad. I blacked out. I don't remember. I remember waking up in my dad's dining room, our house. This is a few houses later. I talk about that in the book too. They didn't do too well financially once they got together. I went from being a pretty decent working class family to a really poverty stricken, poor, really, really poor. But I remember my next memory is I had this army pee bag, one of those green duffel bags, packed with my clothes and a bunch of my cassette tapes and some comic books. My dad was like, "Get the fuck out of my house. I'll never come back." And we got in this argument. I'm like, "Man, are you sure? I'm like, is this the choice that you want to make? This is who you're choosing. Like when the decision was mine, I chose you. You know? And now when the decision's yours, you choose them." And I mean, he would go to his deathbed swearing he knew nothing about it, which is probably the most horrible part of the whole story, is that all of this took place under his house. Man, there was broken arms, broken bones, broken nose, multiple busted head wounds, stitches. So when I got kicked out at 12 years old, man, I turned to what anybody was going to do back then. You know what I mean? I'm living on the streets pretty much in like South Jersey. I mean, literally in South Jersey. But I mean, me, Miles, my best friend growing up, we were going to Camden to squat in buildings because we didn't know where else to go. I was literally the first homeless person in my hometown, and nobody knew it. I hid it until high school. And I started doing dope, heroin, cocaine first, actually. Was the first hard drug I did. But first time I did heroin, man, it was like, where you been all my life? You know, like seriously, like it was like my life sucked. I mean, you can understand why. I had no one, I had nothing. And then here's this little $5 bag of bliss that, you know, was just like, holy shit. And every time I turned to it, it worked. So I turned to it more and more. You know, I was told I was fat, ugly, stupid, lazy, worthless, never going to be anything. You know, you tell that to a kid, they believe it. Look at the most brilliant people in our society, those who do well, the wealthiest, the most successful. They're the ones who've been encouraged their entire life. Not all of them. Some of them are really, you know, like look at Tony Robbins. Love that guy. He came from nothing. He is 100% self-made. He's my like my hero. I love that man. He does so much good for so many people. Sorry, not trying to plug him. You know, at 18 years old, I stuck with school, man. I stuck with learning. I didn't graduate. Got my GED. That's a whole other story. At 18 years old, I came to a little cash because of an accident that I was in, a little settlement, and I ended up taking off with the Grateful Dead. And for the next 21 years, man, it was a party while Jerry was alive. And then when Jerry died, I kept on partying. My party got harder. I got busted the first time in 1996. I had 22 federal indictments for the RICO Act. And I was facing 986 years in federal penitentiary. And I beat it on a technicality. Never even went to court. There was an issue with the warrant. I ended up going to prison for possession of 0.3 of a gram of heroin, which they allegedly found in my little change pocket of my jeans, which is hilarious because I was doing so much dope back then that like that was probably a dirty paper or something. And for the next 10 years, man, I think I was free a total of 8 months, maybe. And I'm not free like as I mean like not incarcerated at all. I was in and out of prisons, county jails, halfway houses, detoxes, rehabs. Till 2005, I got out, and that was the first time beginning of 2006, I got out of prison in November 1st of 2005. I was strung out by Thanksgiving. By my 32nd birthday on January 16th, 2006, I woke up in a house where I was renting a room, where I was on an ankle monitor, wasn't allowed to travel more than 1,000 feet from my front door. It was exactly 996 feet to the front door of the liquor store across the street. I knew that because I walked it off with one of those little walker things, the wheels that you measure with. And at my curfew, I was allowed to leave at 7 o'clock in the morning. I had to be back at 7 o'clock at night. I had a job where I was so strung out that I was using all kinds of stuff to mask my UAs. So I had my job and my parole officer convinced up to this point that I had a tumor on the diaphragm of my stomach, and that's why I couldn't hold anything down. Because when I do heroin, I'm like a drug-induced bulimic. I can't hold anything down. So I lose tons of weight. So my excuse to my parole officer was that I had cancer. So I wake up on my 32nd birthday, and I'm in a room where there's a bunch of people that are all teenagers, because the person that I'm renting the room from is only 21 years old and her boyfriend is 19. So all of his teenage friends came to my 32nd birthday party. I lived 9 blocks away from the parole office on an ankle monitor. And it's like a Tuesday, right? So that was the first time I got clean. It didn't work. I ended up on a bunch of psych meds, pain meds, because I broke my back 2 years into sobriety. For all intents and purposes, I was strung out on pharmaceuticals, psych meds. I ended up relapsing after a bad divorce. And through a failed suicide attempt, I ended up turning myself in. So I was on the run from probation for pawning some stolen stuff. Some events happened while I was in county jail that led me to really take a really, really deep, hard look at my use. And one of the glorious things, the first time I got sober was through 12-step recovery, AA and HA. And I was super big book thumper. It didn't work for me because I was pretending. I was pretending to be okay, because when I worked, I did everything legitimately. I worked the steps to the best of my ability. I mean, the first guy I sponsored, this is nothing on me, but he just celebrated 14 years. He's got more time than I do. He stayed the course. But I gained all this self-knowledge working the steps over and over again for 5 years, because every time I dove deeper, which we're supposed to do. It says in the book that more will be revealed. That's why we continue to work the steps. But when I turn to people and I'm like, man, so it turns out I'm like an even bigger piece of shit than I thought I was. And I have all this stuff. Like, what do I do with it? And everybody's answer was pray about it. Give it to God. Which, don't get me wrong, man, I've had a running dialogue with my higher power since I can remember thinking. So I believe in God. I believe in the power of the universe, what my higher power can do. But I also believe that faith without works is dead. And that I had all this self-insight that literally for myself was a big contributing factor into my relapse, because I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know where to go with it. So when I was in county jail, I decided I was really going to dig deep And I did, man. And I went and I found out that the reason that I got high was because of all this trauma. So for the past 8 years, man, for that first year is when I really, I was like, I'm going to be in here for at least a year. So I committed. I took a vow of celibacy. And there was, oh, you were in county. That means like not looking at things that objectify men or women, not masturbating, not doing anything, because I was addicted to relationships. I used sex and relationships as a way to validate my self-worth. Found that out in sobriety. So that sucked. All these things that I found out that like are my character defects, or as I like to call them, my defense mechanisms, they're what kept me alive. They don't really jive with the man that I'm trying to be in this new life. You know what I mean? So I had to really dig deep and get past that. And I had to get to a point where I could sit and be cool with my demons. We could sit down and we could meditate and we could just be silent, and I could be with myself and I could quiet the voices in my head. And that's what the book talks about, man. You know, it goes way deeper into detail about that, you know, and I'm sorry if I ran over. I tend to, I'm a storyteller, man. So, you know, I knew the book would come eventually. It's here and the Kickstarter's there, man. You know, I think it's a project worth believing in. If others don't, that's fine. You know, the reason I did the Kickstarter is because the self-publishing deal that I have, the more that you invest initially up front, the bigger the promotion and stuff that they do. But if I have to go the low route, I'll go the low route. If I got to sell my car, I'll sell my car, man. Gas is expensive anyway. But it's going to happen. You know, it's a story that needs to be told, like I said, because there's millions of kids who don't have a voice to be heard, you know. So I really appreciate you having me on, man.
Yeah, of course, man. I thank you for sharing your story. And just kind of in closing, would you mind telling the listeners where they can find you? I know you have some different social media profiles. I'm not sure if you have a website or not, but if they're interested in finding out more about your book or finding your Kickstarter, what's the best place for them to find you at?
Yeah, man. On Twitter, I'm @ShadesEagle. On Instagram, I'm Rex __ ShadesEagle. And on Facebook, I'm just Rex ShadesEagle. All very public. I'm not one of those kind of people. If you follow me, I'll follow, or like I'll follow you, and then as soon as you follow me, I'll stop following you. If I don't want to follow you, I won't. But if you want to follow me, that's awesome. I appreciate any and all support. There's a video kind of, you know, supporting the Kickstarter. If you want to find me on Kickstarter, it's the name of the book is No Love: Life Lessons from a Recovered Junkie Ex-Con. So yeah, man, awesome. This has been a great experience, man. It's awesome to meet you kind of face to face and get to talk with you.
Yeah, definitely, man. I'm glad that we were finally able to connect, and, you know, we've been messaging each other back and forth for, oh man, I don't even know how long, at least a couple of weeks. And yeah, just glad to have this conversation, man. Thank you for coming on and being so vulnerable, man, and sharing some of that deep, dark stuff that a lot of us probably don't want to talk about. But, you know, kind of like you alluded to, if we don't address those things from our past, man, like they're going to creep up on us. And, you know, it's a relapse waiting to happen or something along those lines, man. And I know that, it's uncomfortable and it's difficult to talk about and to work on those things, but man, we got to do it.
One of the people that was really big in my recovery was Brene Brown. And she's all about using vulnerability as strength. So if the demons and darkness the demons and the monsters only have power in the dark, once you shine the light on them, they lose their power. Change your story, take back the power.
Rex, thank you again for coming on the show today, man. I really enjoyed our chat. Guys, be sure to check out the links in the show notes so you can stay up to date on his new book.
You've been listening to Recovery Survey. If you got anything out of today's episode, I'd ask you to please leave us a 5-star review and share this episode with a friend. If you'd like to get in contact with us, you can find us at recoverysurvey.com. You can listen to all of our episodes on the website, as well as connect with us on social media, where you can get previews for upcoming episodes.